This is the podcast overview for week 10, where we will be covering chapter 8, social influence. So you're going to be reading chapter 8, and then you're also going to be reading article number 26, which is Milgram's study. It's titled Behavioral Study of Obedience. So Milgram, his main area of research was in the area of obedience and conformity, following kind of the footsteps of Solomon Asch. There are several videos this week. Most are quick, a couple are longer. All are going to be essential for the test and for discussion, so don't miss these. I can't stress that enough. So let's take a look here. These are the objectives for chapter 8. If you want a rundown of these and some discussion into these, you can click here. Your lecture slides are here. Here's the PDF of the article, and here's where your videos start. First, you have an overall crash course on social influence. This covers kind of all the heavy hitters in the field of social psychology. These are really the guys who are the front runners for the subfield of social psych. They're the ones that really carved out social psych as its own sub area within psychology. And they all happen to study the area of social influence, how we are influenced in our social environment. And then this is a free hugs campaign sort of video that was put together, and it deals with conformity. So what happens when we're doing something that is not considered a social norm? How does society respond to that? What could be the consequences? So it's a great video. It's very short and give you a look at social norms a little bit more and what happens when we break a social norm. And then we'll dive into Solomon Asch's original conformity experiment. This is a short video, so I really recommend reading the chapter before you dive into these videos, which will help give you some context before you watch these videos. And then we have the Milgram experiment, the original full documentary from 1962 of his actual study. This is going to be super helpful to watch after you've read the article, which highlights his study and tells you the methods, the results, and sort of lays it all out for you in terms of who's who and what's what. And then we have an updated or a revised Milgram experiment done more recently by Dr. Jerry Berger. And this takes a look at recreating that same original Milgram study with a couple new twists. And so you'll want to check this out to see what were the aims of the study, how did they mirror Milgram's, and what was changed and why. And then I have a Khan Academy video that deals with conformity and obedience. And this is really great because it talks about both and how they're related to one another, but yet how they're different and separate. And then this talks about conformity in the context of groupthink, which is something that can happen in a group dynamic. And we'll actually dive deeper into groupthink when we cover groups at the end of the semester, but this will give you a good preview as it relates to conformity right now. And then you have a video on emotional branding, and this brings up some different persuasion tactics or principles of compliance that you're going to be reading about from Cialdini in the textbook this week. But you want to take a look at this. This is advertising and marketing at its best, and sort of what that's all about. And then lastly, we have the Abu Ghraib prison atrocity. This is a more modern day, real life example of sort of what can go wrong with obedience to authority. It mimics the Milgram study in many regards. So take a look at that, and try to consider some of these questions as you're reading or watching through that video. And then your discussion for this week deals with integrating both Chapter 8 and Article 26. First, you're going to say, what are the implications of Milgram's obedience study for people accused of committing atrocities? Okay, so somebody who's done something really wrong, how can we use Milgram's obedience study to help us understand those things, especially in the context of obeying authority? What were some of the reasons people gave in the Milgram study and in the revised Milgram study for shocking people to the extreme in the study? Would those hold up today if someone tried to use those same reasons for committing an atrocity to humankind? So the people that went all the way to the highest shock value, a lot of them tried to pass off the blame and not pin it on themselves. Who did they blame? Why? What was their reasoning? And would that work today? If you really hurt someone or did something wrong, would that work as an excuse? Could you pass it off on someone else and not take responsibility for your actions? And so on that same vein, suppose that the results of the Milgram study had been known back when the Nazi war criminals were put on trial in Nuremberg. I'm sure you've studied this in history. All of the Nazi leaders and officers after the war were put on trial. They were to stand trial for their crimes against humanity. If people had known back then about Milgram's study and the effects of obedience to authority, would it have changed anything? Could the information have been used in their defense? What do you think? And do the results of Milgram's findings remove some of the personal responsibility that people have for their actions? Do you think that that's okay? Explain your answers and provide support. So it's a lot of interjection this week. It's a lot of taking what you are reading and watching in the videos and coming to your own conclusions. But I want you to support those conclusions using examples from the research that you're reading. And then lastly, you have exam 4. As usual, it's 30 questions, 2 points each, multiple choice. It's going to be covering chapters 7 and 8. Please let me know this week as you're working through the material. You have some big studies this week if you have any questions.